After having defeated the Minotaur and the tragic death of the Aegean king, Theseus, the crown prince of Athens, became Attica's ruler. The new king of Athens, after consolidating his power, started to be seen with great reverence due to his accomplishments when he was still quite young. Theseus was a fair, sapient, and magnanimous king. He was not hungry for power, to the point where he handed it to the people, and all citizens were seen as equals. Theseus only kept his position of supreme chief of the Athenian army. This was a period of major prosperity throughout Attica. Athens was regarded as the world's happiest and most free city, and democracy flourished in it. The king had an extremely kind heart, and when the news came to him that the great hero Hercules had gone mad, plunged into a dreadful depression, Theseus departed to help the great hero. Theseus managed to retrieve Hercules' morale, and from this meeting, the two heroes strengthened their friendship. When Hercules left for the kingdom of the Amazon to conduct another of his famous labors, Theseus followed him. After defeating the Amazons, Theseus returned to Attica, bringing Antiope with him. The hero had a son with her, named Hippolytus. But the Amazons had not forgotten Antiope's abduction, the princess of the Amazons, and prepared an expedition to invade the region of Attica. The warrior women terrorized the area and actually invaded Athens. But, led by Theseus, the Athenian population fought the mob of female warriors. Antiope fought alongside Theseus, and for her betrayal, she was killed on the battlefield. The Athenians valiantly repelled the invaders. After the heroic victory of the Athenians, no enemy dared to invade Athens again during Theseus's reign. Although not hungry for power, Theseus loved to take part in adventures that led him to join the hunt for Calydon's boar and followed the hero Jason in his quest for the Golden Fleece. Theseus had reached the zenith of his glory. His prestige was so vast that some referred to him as the Athenian Hercules. Unlike many other Greek heroes, Theseus's life was not interrupted in his youth, and so, alongside his friend Pirithous, the king of the Lapiths, Theseus was also involved in several other adventures. Invited by Pirithous, the king of Lapiths, Theseus traveled to the region of Thessaly. Pirithous was about to marry the beautiful princess Hippodamia. The relatives of the king, known as Lapiths, were invited to the royal wedding. Mountain people seen as rude but very brave. They were the first Greeks to tame and ride horses. The Lapiths were children of the famous king Ixion, who was punished by the gods, having to suffer for all eternity in Tartarus. The centaurs were also invited, beings who were a mixture of man and horse. The creatures were also sons of Ixion, and because of that, there was a rivalry between them and the Lapiths. The festivities had begun, and Theseus fraternized with the Lapiths and the centaurs. Everything appeared to be in good spirits in such an exotic party. But as the guests started to become intoxicated with so many beverages, the more primitive instincts of the centaurs began to emerge. Pirithous, the leader of the centaurs, drunk with wine, decided to abduct the beautiful bride of Pirithous. The centaur grabbed Hippodamia, and the bride cried out in panic. The other centaurs followed their leader's example and took with them the guests' wives and the king's maids. Theseus could not believe in such a barbaric act, and alongside Pirithous, he led the Lapiths against the centaurs. The Lapiths threw all within their reach against the centaurs. Plates, amphoras, and jars flew through the air. Theseus hit the leader of the centaurs with a brass jar. The creature fell to the ground, with his head cracked open. Pirithous used his spear to attack the centaurs. The struggle between the Lapiths and centaurs was bloody. But Theseus's presence, who was now fighting with a club, was decisive for the Lapiths' win. The queen was rescued, and so Pirithous was left with a great debt of gratitude to Theseus. This event strengthened even more the friendship between the heroes. who would become inseparable friends, and together they would invade even the kingdom of the dead. Theseus was no longer young, and after Antiope's death, the Amazon mother of his son Hippolytus, the hero never married again. But the hero then met Phaedra, Ariadne's sister, the great love that Theseus had in his youth days. The similarities between the girl and his old love led Theseus to feel his golden youthful years again, when he faced the terrible Minotaur all by himself. With the consent of the king of Crete, the hero married Phaedra and made her his queen, thus establishing an alliance between the Cretan kingdom and Athens. The age gap between Theseus and his new wife was enormous. She was the same age as his son Hippolytus. The boy was pure and had made a vow of chastity in honor of the goddess Artemis. The prince was quite handsome, and so the queen started to grow a secret love for her stepson. Only her faithful servant knew of the queen's love for Hippolytus. Theseus was away on a journey, and Phaedra took advantage of this opportunity to unleash her repressed love. The queen declared her love before Hippolytus and proposed him a union so that they could reign over Athens together. Hippolytus, unlike Phaedra, was loyal to Theseus above anyone else and repudiated the shameful proposition. The boy left Athens, leaving the broken-hearted queen behind. Phaedra, desperate, decided to take her own life, but due to her passionate madness, she left a letter to Theseus. The old hero, returning to Athens, learns of his wife's death, and Phaedra's letter was delivered by his servant. The letter's content had a devastating effect. In her madness, the queen accused Hippolytus of having tried to rape her, and in order to avoid being unfaithful to her husband, she said she had no other choice but to take her own life. Theseus, absolutely enraged, confronted his son with the letter that proved his disloyalty. Hippolytus denied having committed such a tenebrous act, but Theseus did not believe his son's word. The king of Athens cursed Hippolytus and asked Poseidon, his divine father, to put an end to the disloyal prince's life. Hippolytus departed in his chariot, with his heart extremely affected by sorrow. Later that day, Theseus received the news that his son had suffered a terrible accident while he was driving his carriage and was close to death. Theseus tried to remain indifferent after receiving such news, but Phaedra's servant could not bear to see the suffering caused by her lady and decided to reveal the whole truth to Theseus. The sovereign of Athens was overwhelmed by an immense grief. He ran to his son, who was about to give his last breath. Shedding tears on the boy's body, Theseus blamed himself for not trusting his son. Hippolytus, using his last bouts of strength, took his father's hand and looked into his eyes. He forgave his father from the bottom of his heart. The great Athenian hero Theseus had already left his young years behind. Despite still having an undeniable physical prowess, his white hair pointed to the beginning of his decline. And wanting to relive his young adventures, he departed with his friend Pirithous, the king of the Lapiths, in search of challenges. Their tortuous paths led him to Sparta, where Tyndareus reigned. At Artemis's temple, a feast was being held, where young girls danced gracefully. But among them, there was one who stood over all others. Her name was Helen, and people said that she was the daughter of the queen with Zeus himself, being the world's most beautiful woman. Theseus was consumed by lust, and, with the help of his friend, he abducted Helen, who, despite her voluptuous beauty, was still very young. Theseus and Pirithous drew lots to see who would be with the young maiden, and the fate decided in favor of Theseus. The old hero promised that he would help his friend to find a woman as beautiful as she was, and also a daughter of Zeus. But before that, he left Helen with his mother, Aethra. No woman could even match Helen's beauty. So Pirithous realized that only the beauty of a goddess could reach the Spartan princess. Then, he made the decision that he would take a goddess for himself and chose Persephone as his target. Persephone was also the daughter of Zeus, but Hades' wife as well, the lord of the world of the dead. Nevertheless, Theseus and Pirithous unwisely went to the kingdom of Hades in search of their prey. The heroes paved their way towards the underworld until they reached Hades' palace. However, the attempt to abduct Persephone went wrong, and with a trick, Hades imprisoned Theseus and Pirithous. Both spent many years imprisoned in the underworld, and would have stayed there forever if not for Hercules, who went to the underworld to accomplish his 12th labor, which was to capture Cerberus. Hercules freed Theseus, but when he tried to release Pirithous, an earthquake showed that this was not the will of the gods. Theseus returned to the surface, and Pirithous didn't. They say that, as punishment, he is still trapped there, while others say that the king of the Lapiths was devoured by Cerberus. While Theseus was imprisoned in the underworld, Helen's brothers, Castor and Pollux, rescued the Spartan princess and took her back to her parents. After returning to the world of the living, the dusking Theseus was preparing himself for his life's melancholy twilight. Theseus was imprisoned in Tartarus for having tried, together with his friend Pirithous, to abduct Persephone, the wife of Hades. Much time had passed since, until Hercules appeared to finally release the hero from his underworld incarceration. When the hero finally saw daylight again, he was already old, and his vigor had been devoured by the passage of time. He was unbeknownst to the changes that his Attica kingdom had endured during that interim, due to Theseus's long-lasting absence. The Spartans, Castor and Pollux, together with their hordes, defeated Athens' popular government as the Spartans tried to retrieve their sister Helena, who had been abducted by Theseus. Taking advantage of the chaos settled in the process, the Athenian nobility took power back to themselves. Menestheus started to reign over Athens, a descendant of the family that governed Athens before the rise to power of Theseus's father. Theseus was now just the shadow of the man he used to be, and knew that he had no strength whatsoever to fight for Athens. With that in mind, he decided to take his children from the city, hiding and sending them to Crete. Their grandfather would surely welcome them. Due to the bad weather conditions, Theseus had to make a stop on the island of King Lycomedes, where Theseus had a large estate, and King Lycomedes offered to introduce his lands to him. But he did not know that Lycomedes was actually a close friend of Menestheus, Attica's ruler at the time, and that he also wished to annex those lands of Theseus to his kingdom. The king led the old hero through a road on the banks of a cliff, and, taking advantage of Theseus's distraction, Lycomedes pushed him off the cliff. Theseus, the hero whose adventures were sung and praised all over Greece, was dead. His reckless adventures in his old age tarnished the hero's reputation for centuries. But, according to the legend, when King Darius of Persia decided that he wanted to invade Athens, Theseus's spirit re-emerged, filling the heart of the Athenian soldiers with courage, leading them to victory over the Persians during the famous Battle of Marathon. In honor of Theseus, the Athenians put in motion an expedition to rescue the mortal remains of the hero. The hero's bones were buried in Athens, receiving great honor. After all, the greatest of all Athenian heroes would forever rest in that place.